it is time for another mystery date with a book. I've done this once before and I will link the video for that, but the idea of a mystery date with a book was something I came up with from the username of Faye or Mystery Date with a Book. I love that idea, I loved her name, and I thought that it would be really fun if we exchanged some of our dating profiles when it comes to what we do and don't like in books, and then choose a book or a mystery date for the other person, read it, and see how the date goes. In this way, we have a personalized date with a book. After I did that video, Sarah from Sarah's Reading Nook said that she would love to do a mystery date with a book exchange with me as well. So I was very excited. I'm going to refresh the memory on what I look for and don't look for in books. So knowing that, Sarah chose Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay. And for Sarah, I chose, she's gonna go ahead and tell you in her video. I will link her video and I can't wait. I'm really nervous because sometimes Sarah's like the wild card. We're in a book club together, the Top Shelf Society, and Sarah's usually one of the ones who we're kind of always wondering if she's gonna love it or if she's gonna hate it, because she can surprise us both ways. But that's the thing, it's a mystery date. Even if the other person ends up not loving the book that you chose, it just means that number one, you get to know their taste a little bit more, and number two, they tried something different. And you know, you win some, you lose some, so no shame if you end up not liking it. Normally I would prefer to do a reading vlog involved in these mystery date books and update my thoughts along the way like I did with my last one, but things got very hectic. I've said before, I'm in the process of moving, so I couldn't really film very easily, and I have finished the book and I'm ready to tell you how my date went with Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay. So for starters, Roxane Gay mentions towards the beginning of her book, there's a section about herself, me, and she says that she wrote blog posts, and that's kind of what I feel like this book was. The chapters are essays about quite a lot of different subjects. Many of them are commentaries on pop culture. There's also a really wide range of subject matters that she touches on, which really caught me by surprise because I was expecting this book to be about feminism since it's called Bad Feminist. But in reality, when I read it, I discovered that it's titled Bad Feminist because it's more about her and her own thoughts and her life. She is a self-described bad feminist because while she subscribes to everything that feminism stands for in equality, there are always kind of contradictions that we live with. Some of the subject matters that she touches on in this book, in these individual chapters, essays, are feminism, racism, privilege, profiling, representation. She talks about respectability politics, rape and rape culture, being an educator, likability, and a great discussion on trigger warnings. Those are just a few of the many subject matters that she touches on. In my review, I think that people should read this book. Definitely. I was a bit thrown. As I said, I was going into this expecting this entire book to be about feminism. I really loved a chapter talking about, it's called Not Here to Make Friends. It's talking about likability and why is likability even a question? Why are we concerned with that in fact or in fiction especially? As book reviewers and lovers, the literary likability conversations, she talks about how odd they are because that implies that we are like engaging in a kind of courtship and we're looking for them to meet our qualifications and meet our standards. And especially in fictional characters, that's not necessarily the point. We're all human, and a lot of times the unlikable characters are the most human characters. And she writes that perhaps then unlikable characters, the ones who are the most human, are also the ones who are the most alive. Perhaps this intimacy makes us uncomfortable because we don't dare be so alive. And I would tend to agree with that. She gives some examples of characters from stories who were tended to be the more like troublemakers or the ones that we would deem not likable. And a lot of times we tend to like that and appreciate that and identify with that. For example, we tend to like villains because we think they're more interesting. My example that I would think of is Evelyn Hugo from The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. She isn't necessarily a likable character because she makes quite a bit of selfish or manipulative or deceptive decisions and actions. I love her. I love her because, again, it's almost that part of it's what makes them human. And again, that quote about sometimes we don't dare be so alive and so at risk of being unlikable because it's such a big deal to us for some reason in reality and in our fictional characters. Another discussion that I loved was the section on trigger warnings. I absolutely loved reading about her perspective. In the case of this one, as well as in the case of some others, she doesn't necessarily provide an answer. Sometimes there isn't an answer. Sometimes it's just our own thoughts, our own speculation, our own ideas. She really brought up aspects of both arguments, both sides, because she points out that, in life you don't really get trigger warnings. And in reality, for everyone, something is a trigger. She talks about the idea of, is it even possible to put trigger warnings on everything? And should we even be trying to protect ourselves and create this illusion of safety when we don't actually always have it in life? But then she also brings up the fact that the person who doesn't need trigger warnings, is it their place to decide that for someone who does? Or should we just do what we can to make people more comfortable and feel more safe? So there's really just thinking about both sides of it and giving great examples and thoughts that I really appreciated. I really love the chapters. There were multiple chapters where she discusses race and racism and racial profiling and a lot of the issues that we face. I want to say in America, but it's not. It's in the whole world. She talked about terrorism in another and about how we get this idea in our mind. She said we have a portrait in our minds what danger and terror looks like, and talked about some people that we see, they're like, oh, well, they were such a great guy and they were never someone that I would ever suspect. And then you have on the inverse Trayvon Martin, who, another quote from her, was murdered, and then certain people worked overtime to uncover his failing, even though he was the victim of the crime, and that he went on trial for his own murder. And she discusses and shares thoughts about the myth of the criminalized black man and how we have in our minds what is and isn't what we would expect to be someone who would have, as she said, danger or terror. What is and isn't seared into our collective consciousness. As you can see, she touches on such a variety of so many complex and nuanced subject matters, and that's why I don't expect an answer or a solution to these, because when it comes to something so complex and nuanced, there isn't always an easy answer. That's the thing about life. There's not always a clear-cut answer, but there are steps that we can take to make changes. And I think reading a book like this is a helpful step. By reading this book, you are opening up your mind and thoughts to a lot of different subject matters that you might have never thought of, and a different perspective than you might have considered before, which is a key in growth and learning and empathy. I'm going to end it with a quote or two quotes about feminism that she talks about, because at the core, this book is titled Bad Feminist, and there is touches on that throughout the whole book. Some women being empowered does not prove the patriarchy is dead. It proves that some of us are lucky. And then on the next page it says, pointing out the many ways in which misogyny persists and harms women is not anger. Conceding the idea that anger is an inappropriate reaction to the injustice women face backs women into an unfair position. Nor does disagreement mean we are blind to the ways in which progress has been made. Feminists are celebrating our victories and acknowledging our privilege when we have it. We're simply refusing to settle. We're refusing to forget how much work there is yet to be done. We're refusing to relish the comforts we have at the expense of the women who are still seeking comfort. This book ended up being a great date. The thing that I will say stuck with me throughout the whole book that made me confused was that Sara overestimated how much pop culture I know and follow, because I didn't know most, if not, is there a higher word than most? Like, I would say I knew maybe 10% of the references in this book, and there are many. The entire book is filled with references to pop culture, to movies, to songs, to people, famous people, TV shows, reality TV, books, so many things, and I guess I'm not very cultured because I didn't know any of them. For example, there are some big sections talking about the TV show Girls and how its representation and feminism might not quite be what it thought it was. There were entire sections dedicated to 50 Shades of Grey, to The Help and Django Unchained, and to reality TV as well, and I don't know any of those things. And I wanted to point out, because I read Sarah's Goodreads review about this book, and it is a spot-on review. I agree with everything that she said. And the one line that stood out to me that made me laugh was that Sarah had written that she had fortunately been aware of many of the references in this book, and then she put, if I hadn't been, well, that would be an awful spoiler for a great deal of novels and movies. Which was what it was for me. Sometimes I just let myself be spoiled for a lot of it because I really wanted to hear Roxane's message and thoughts on it. But sometimes, yeah, I was completely clueless. So this is at no fault at all, obviously, to the author. This is just myself. If especially you do engage in a lot of popular culture, you would especially love to hear these thoughts because there's some wonderful commentary. I'm very glad that I bought this book, and I am very grateful for Sarah's suggestion. I had actually already planned on reading this book and had it on my TBR, so when Sarah chose this for me, I got real excited. For me, I would say the beginning, the first quarter at least, I was quite lost. I would definitely agree with Sarah's review that at least, I would say even before the halfway point and on, I was highlighting like crazy. I loved the different subject matters and thoughts that she gave to us. I will say I was reading another nonfiction book at the time, and whenever I would return to Bad Feminist, I was always captivated by how clearly her voice shines through the page, through her writing. Her writing and her words have personality. I don't feel like I'm reading a textbook. It's so wonderful to get to read a book with such a distinct voice. If you have any interest in any of those subjects, but on top of that, even if you don't have an interest in any of those subjects, I would still recommend just reading it and giving it a shot because there's so many things you could take away. And I'm excited to see if Sarah liked hers as well. If you're interested in doing this with me, let me know. It's always fun to recommend books to one another. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.